Good evening. I'm Maxine Miller with the League of Women Voters. I welcome you all to this candidate forum. We call it a debate for the candidates and the voters. The program is intended to inform the voters where the candidates are on issues that are important to the community and to our government. I am going to thank the sponsors, including Lewis Clark State College, Jason Goldhammer, the video production for LCSC, the City of Lewiston, and the League of Women Voters. Our program tonight will be moderated by Bert Sahlberg. He is the Marketing and Special Projects Coordinator of Lewis Clark State College. He serves as the chair for the Lewis Clark Valley Chamber of Commerce's Idaho Government Affairs Committee. In addition, he's on the board of directors of the LC Valley Chamber, Twin County United Way, and Warrior Athletics Association. Bert has spent more than 30 years in the media, including both the sports editor and editorial writer for the Tribune. Bert graduated from the University of Idaho with a degree in political science. Please welcome our moderator, Bert Sahlberg. Thank you.
Thank you, Maxine, and thank you, League of Women Voters. Tonight should be a fun event. I'm excited for our 8 candidates that are here. Quickly go over things and then we'll get started. Tonight, all candidates with opposition in the general election in the Legislative District 6 in Nez Perce County were asked to participate in the debate tonight. 8 of the 10 candidates are here. Unfortunately, we had one candidate that had personal matters, and so we're honoring Representative Stevenson's request to withdraw from tonight's debate, and therefore candidate Dan Rudolph also will not participate in tonight's debate, but we're excited that the remaining 8 candidates are here. The way it works tonight is that we'll take 2 candidates and we will ask them questions. We will rotate who answers first, and then we will move on after 20 minutes to the second group, and then we will do the final group of our legislators. Following that, we will take questions from the audience. Again, the audience is reminded that at any time they can write down questions and pass them out to the side. We will gather them and then ask the questions later on this evening. So let's just go ahead and get started. First, we're going to hear from the candidates for Nez Perce County Commissioner District 2. Incumbent Doug Havens has worked for Clearwater Paper, Burlington Northern, and the Camas Prairie Railroad, as well as owning Haven Home Inspections. Doug was raised in Lewiston and attended Lewiston High School and Lewis Clark State College. He's been married to Rebecca Larson Havens for 38 years with 3 children and 5 grandchildren. Doug also served on the Lewiston City Council and was mayor of Lewiston. Welcome, Mr. Doug Havens. Challenger Ron Whitman lives in Lewiston and is on call with Building on Site Services in Lewiston. He was farm manager for Shaw Ranch, developing manager of Harvest Vista Subdivision, bus driver for the Lewiston School District, and road manager for TGM Investments. Ron also graduated from Lapwai High School and attended LCSC. He is married to Karen Whitman, and they have 2 children. Ron has also spent 8 years as a Nez Perce County Commissioner. So welcome to you 2 candidates.
Thank you.
We're going ahead and get started with our first question. Our first question is for the challenger. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't talk about the time. Each question, they have 90 seconds to respond to the question. There are lights in front of them. They will get a yellow warning light when there's 15 seconds left. They will get a red light when the time 90 seconds has expired. At that point, we will let them finish their sentence, but cut them off from further answering the question so we can keep this rolling. So that's the way it's going to work tonight. So our first question tonight is for Challenger Whitman. Why are you seeking this office, and what are your qualifications for this position?
Well, I want to thank the League for having us here tonight, and I guess the reason I'm here running again is I believe that I didn't finish what I had planned to do as a county commissioner in the years that I was there, and I'm hoping that I can get back in there and basically straighten out the commissioner's office. I think my challenger over the past 4 years has has increased the budget without doing anything to benefit the taxpayers of the county, and I think I could get in there and do a better job.
Doug, same question. Why are you seeking this office, and what are your qualifications for this position?
Thank you, Bert. And welcome everyone tonight. Thank you to the League for sponsoring this forum, and it's good to see a full house. I have been your county commissioner, representative from District 2 for the last 4 years. Previously, I sat on the Lewiston City Council. I'm seeking re-election because I really enjoy public service, and you've entrusted me with an awesome responsibility, and that's your tax dollars. And I take that commitment very seriously. Now, we've had some tough times in the county, really tough times. Revenues are way down, and we've struggled with that, and we've had to make some serious decisions, and I mean some serious cuts that were not pleasant to do. But we had to do those in order to maintain a healthy budget, and we had to raise taxes to make jail payments. As revenues were going down and jail payments had to be made, we weren't going to default on any of those bills that we had to pay. Some people think that the county takes in a lot of revenue. We don't. We take in, out of every tax dollar, the city of Lewiston takes in approximately 50 cents. The county takes in 25 cents. And from that revenue, we provide most all of the justice system funding. A lot of juvenile detention and counseling things, and numerous things that I'm not going to have time to tell you about. But it's my job to make sure we pay our bills. Thank you.
Doug, second question. Regarding the Nez Perce County budget, what are your 3 highest priorities or concerns?
Thank you, Bert, for that question. Well, these are listed on my brochure, and I'd ask you to pick one up on your way out. We do have a concern with the local option tax going away. We have reached our 10-year limit on that. That was started to generate revenue to pay our jail bond. The bond was specifically set up so it was front-loaded so large payments would be made the first 10 years. And we've been making those payments. Over $2 million would come due February of every year. Well, the option now is going away. So now, even though the payments are being reduced now to about $600,000, that money's got to come from somewhere. So that's one thing we've got to be mindful of. We've got to be mindful of our prosecuting or our public defender's contract. That's in flux right now. I'm curious to see what our state legislators are going to say about it. The county provides funding for our public defenders. We're currently about $750,000 for 4 public defenders. So that's something to watch. And of course, urban renewal, everybody's favorite topic. We're going to get a lot of questions about that, I hope. I hope we have enough time to really dig into it because I've got a lot to say about it. Thank you.
Ron, same question regarding the county budget. What are your 3 highest priorities?
Thanks, Bert. I believe one of the first things is to get in and really analyze the budget and why it's got up the $3.2 million over the last 3 years. I know that there are costs involved and that the public defender contract went up substantially. I know that the money that is going to indigent programs has gone up about $90,000. And those are things that I think as a county we need to be lobbying our legislatures to help us out and take care of those payments, the CAT fund, and help bail the county out, even if it's the Affordable Care Act being implemented to its fullest. That's money that can come into the state to help the counties pay on that sort of debt, and not the local taxpayers in each county. And I think the third thing would be continuing to improve on the courthouse. I know there hasn't been anything done on the 3rd floor basically since I left office, and I believe that we need to not have the rooms flooding on our employees, and I think there's a way to improve the county courthouse with that sort of money being set for it.
All right, thank you. Our third question, we'll start off with again with you, Ron. What is the relationship between the county and the Port of Lewiston, and what could be done to enhance that relationship?
Well, the Port of Lewiston is a self-governing agency. I've had discussions with a fellow that has issues with the port and their spending of money, that they're not spending wisely. I sat in on the Port Commission meetings for most of the years that I was on the commission, and I think those guys are doing a pretty good job out there. I think they are, like Mr. Haven said, we're in a downturn budget-wise, and we need to be able to sustain the operations out there, and we just need to continue to work with them.
Doug, same question. What is the relationship between the county and the Port of Lewiston, and what could be done to enhance that relationship?
Well, I think we have a good relationship with the port. We don't have a lot of interaction with them. We sit on committees, representation from either side. I know all three port commissioners. I've worked with all three. I like them all. For quite a time, I sat on the Lower Clearwater Exchange Program Committee headed by Jerry Clem, program that he's heading up, not as part of the port, but as just as a port commissioner, taking the lead on that to provide additional waters to the orchards, and I congratulate him for that. I serve with Mary Hasnerl on the Urban Renewal Board, and we've had our disagreements, but she runs a fair meeting, and we just agree to disagree on some things. So the port as an entity, well, they can generate their own revenues. They are a taxing entity. They have the ability to raise taxes, lower taxes. They've kept it at a lump sum or a fixed rate for several years. I don't always agree with everything the port has done. I'm disappointed that they don't generate more self-sustaining revenue. I'm disappointed to see the container business dropping off like it is, because that's why it was created in the first place. So thank you for the question.
Okay. Doug, the fourth question, we'll start with you. You can ask your opponent a question related to the race.
Okay. Something we haven't talked about, Ron, I guess. You were involved in this, so well, let's talk about urban renewal a little bit. It hasn't come up yet in a question, but the county prosecutor and actually all of the elected officials that are involved in urban renewal believe that the City of Lewiston and the Urban Renewal Agency are in violation of state statute governing urban renewal issues. Do you disagree or agree with the prosecutor, and would you disagree with the prosecutor and support the position of the city, or would you try to change the minds of all the elected officials that support the prosecutor's opinion?
I understand what the commissioners are trying to do to recoup money for the county. I just think that there's a better working relationship that the county could have with Urban Renewal, the board, and get those things accomplished in some sort of a reasonable fashion to make money refunded to the county, and then also work with them to have those areas, urban renewal areas, taken off of the rolls, and then also if they want to go outside those boundaries, go back and try to reestablish a new area.
Right. Ron, you get to ask your opponent a question related to the race.
Well, Doug, your first campaign was all about me personally giving myself a 3% raise. Since then, over the past almost 4 years in office, you have raised the county budget over $3 million and given yourself raises in that time. What do you believe you have done to earn another term?
Thanks for the question, Ron. First, I want to correct a couple things. I took exception with your 5% raise. It wasn't 3%, as reported in the Tribune. It says 5%. And actually, my first budget as a commissioner, we rolled that back. We cut the entire 5% back to what it originally was. So, and then the commissioners also, the following year, only gave cost of living increases. We did not give the longevity increase. And there's a formula for elected officials that factors in longevity with the cost of living, and then your raise is based on that. And that's something the commission is going to take up, because a couple of us, at least a couple of us, maybe all of us, don't agree that that's the best formula. So let me state something else. And the budget has gone up. There's no doubt about it. It's hard to do business without a budget going up. There's raises involved. There's just cost increases, fuel, and just all kinds of things. So while you're making cuts, there's things still going up. Ron, you were in office 8 years. In those 8 years, the county budget went up $10 million. So my budget going up $3.2 million is a little bit less than that. So we've worked hard to reduce our expenditures. Like I said before, we've made an awful lot of cuts in jobs, in services we provide, and I feel like I've made some tough calls and held the line just about as tough as strong as I can. Thanks for the question.
Just a reminder for our audience, if you have questions for either candidates, you can write them down and pass them to the side. Also, just a reminder for the people in the back, if you see the back of your heads on the screen, it's because the camera is right behind you, so if you could please move away from the glass so we do have a clear view of the candidates, that would be appreciated. So, question number 5. We'll start with you, Doug. Would you explain your position on the impact of indigent health care costs on the budget?
Well, on the budget, and first let me say the county commissioners aren't going to be casting any votes on this. I'm curious to see what the legislators too will say on this. It could save the county some money on indigent care. There's no doubt about that. It does become a little bit of a philosophical question. Should we be accepting money from the federal government to flow into Idaho, to help us save money in the short term, at least anyway? And as the federal government backs off their contributions, who's left holding the bag? What have we done now? We've created something that may not even be sustainable. I don't know. I really don't. We do spend an awful lot of money in indigent health care. We're doing a better job at it, investigating the claims that we get, reviewing the claims, what's medically necessary. I think over the years that I've been there, we've done a pretty good job of it, and we've got some gals in the office that really work hard at it to make sure county dollars are spent appropriately and not needlessly for indigent health care.
Ron, the same question. Would you explain your position on the impact of indigent health care costs on the budget?
Well, Bert, I think I addressed that a little bit earlier. I'd like to hear what the legislative candidates have to say about that. I think we need to go to our state government and get some help. I guess we can agree to disagree on whether money coming into the state of Idaho is a good thing or a bad thing. We don't know whether the money is going to be dwindling down over the future years. So I guess that's a difference that we will both have on whether that comes to fruition. I agree with Doug. The two gals in the office up there, they're probably two of the top gals in the state. In fact, one of them is on a state board because of her knowledge about what's needed at the county level. And she is very proactive on legislative issues, trying to help the counties all across the state get better reactions from the legislative folks. So I think it's going to be up to the state legislature and the governor-to-be or the sitting governor to really take a hard look at this issue and help the counties out. They can't keep pulling money away from the counties and expect the taxpayers of the county to fill those coffers.
You both touched on this one a little bit, but the next question, what is your plan to resolve the issues related to the areas of impact between the city of Lewiston and Nez Perce County? Ron, we'll start with you.
Well, I believe they're settled. I believe this last commission and the city came to an agreement to change some boundaries and work things out. And that's what we need to do, is work with our fellow government and make those things happen. I think the boards that were there, both from the city and the county, worked diligently to get that job done. And from what I understand, it's kind of a done deal.
Doug, same question. What is your plan to resolve the issue?
Thank you. That's a good question. You know, the area city impact, that bordering land just outside the city limits has always been kind of a big issue of contention. Who governs that? What are the building standards? Why do I have to put curb and gutter in when I live in the county? And things like that. So when the county and the city couldn't agree on specifics, there's state statute that says this is what you do, and what you do is you form a commission, a 9-member commission made up of the 3 commissioners, 3 city council members, and then 3 citizens at large selected by the other 6, and that's what we did, and we got 3 good citizens that wanted to be involved in that process. So I sat on that commission along with my fellow commissioners and the mayor and 2 other city council members. We had a very good, lively discussion about all the issues. Where it sits now is we've reached agreement at that level. It now goes to the city, the respective body of the city, the respective body of the county, which is basically us again, and for review and adoption. So we've made great headways, and I think this is a perfect example of committees that I've worked on and had great success with, even though it's been said that I create some kind of contention with folks that I sit with. This is a perfect example of government working at its best.
Okay, our last question for you candidates tonight. What is the most pressing issue facing Nez Perce County, and how do you plan to address this issue if you are elected? Doug, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Bert. It's really tough to pick one thing. It really is. And the one thing I would pick, or even the several things I would mention, would always come down to the budget. It's always money. It's always about your money. I mean, we have money to do a lot of different things. The problem is it's still in your pocket, and we haven't got it yet. And that's what government's really good at. And that's what I try not to do. So we try to live within our means. We try and reduce programs and not fill positions that are vacated, and try to work smarter and better and more efficient. That will be the one issue, because as the local option tax, as it now decreases our sales tax revenue, I'm not sure what to expect as revenues coming in to make sure we make our jail bond payment, to make sure we pay our bills, to make sure that I don't have to keep asking you to raise your taxes. And granted, they're basically half of what the city's taxes are. But we've got a lot of issues. We've got some aging buildings that Mr. Whitman has referred to. He's incorrect saying we haven't put money into the courthouse. The 3rd floor has actually been used as storage because the county clerk has so much stuff to store. But we've replaced carpets, painted walls, tore up carpets, painted floors, replaced ceiling tiles, seal-coated parking lots, restriped. I have a whole list of things that we've done. We just don't get a lot of attention for it. And it doesn't cost a lot of money because we do it in-house. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Doug. Ron, for you, what is the most pressing issue facing Nez Perce County, and how do you plan to address this issue if you are elected?
Thanks, Bert. Well, I believe the budget is the biggest issue. The local option tax going away is going to be a tough issue to tackle. But that's when you start buckling your belt and making things to where you take care of the down-to-earth real needs of the county and get rid of the fluff. Although there isn't a whole lot of fluff in the county, because about 80-some% is mandated under state statute that the counties have to do that sort of thing. That 20% has to be looked at, and I agree there are going to be tough decisions to make, and I wish and hope that I'm back in there to make those tough choices, because I think I can get it done.
All right. Thank you both for the great discussion. I appreciate it. Just a reminder that if you have any questions for either candidates, they'll both be here, and you can pass them to the side. And at the end of hearing from all our candidates, we will open it up to the questions from the audience, the written questions. So if you have a question for any of them, please write them down and pass them to the side, and they will be collected. Our second race tonight that we're going to talk about is the candidates for Nez Perce County Coroner race. The challenger is Brett Bovard, who works for the Lapwai School District as the interventional math and science paraprofessional. He has lived in Nez Perce County since 1996 and attended both the University of Idaho and Lewis Clark State College, studying natural sciences, human biology, and chemistry. He and his wife Linda have 2 sons, and this is the first time Brett has run for office. Brett's opponent is incumbent Gary Gillum. He has an emergency medical technician for 39 years. He is also a level 1 certified firefighter and has been a fire chief in Cul-de-sac, assistant fire chief in Nez Perce County, and is a member of the Nez Perce County Search and Rescue Team. He is also president of the Idaho State Coroners Association. He and his wife Beverly are lifelong Nez Perce County residents and have 2 children and 1 granddaughter. Welcome to both of you. And we will start with our incumbent, Gary. First question is, why are you seeking this office, and what are your qualifications for this position?
Right off the bat, why I'm seeking this position is that I feel I have a little bit more to do in our office to bring it up a little bit more than we have. And it's not that we have been bad. When I started in this position, the cases that we had were in paper bags. We now have grown up from that. We now have files, and things are going well. It's one of those things that I would like to finish out.
Brett, same question. Why are you seeking this office, and what are your qualifications for this position?
Okay, I believe I have the educational background in science necessary for the job, and in my previous employments I've always been promoted to the point of management and budget management as well. I also have the demeanor for the job. I understand the nature of it, and I would like the opportunity to serve the citizens of Nez Perce County, and I think I have a lot to offer the position, and I would love to have the opportunity to try it. And this is a public interview, it's a public job, and that's why I'm here.
Okay. We're going to ask both candidates before I ask this second question just to move the microphones a little bit closer to yourself so everyone can hear you. All right, Brett, we're going to start with you with the second question. What is your understanding of the amount of time this position requires?
Well, my understanding is that, it fluctuates from time to time depending on the situation from week to week. I understand that the nature of the position and processing the paperwork needs to be done in a timely fashion. So there's things that need to be done once again in a timely fashion, and it's a 24-hour-a-day thing for the coroner to be on call and ready and be able to move at a moment's notice and to develop a support staff to help him out and have a good working relationship with the fire and police departments to help expedite your job.
Gary, same question. What is your understanding of the amount of time this position requires?
A lot. Brett's exactly right. As a coroner, you're on duty 24 hours a day, basically 7 days a week. We do have some deputy coroners that will help us to a degree, but it takes time. If you're going out on calls at night and then you still have paperwork, like Brett was saying, there's a lot of paperwork that's involved in the coroner's office anymore, which is good because we need to have that for all of our records. But it takes time, and it's not a part-time position anymore, which it used to be. It's not a part-time position anymore.
Third question, Gary, we'll start with you. What is the most pressing issue facing the coroner's office, and how do you plan to address this issue if you're elected?
The most pressing issues would probably be computer issues. And I'm saying that not that we have a bad computer system. We have a good computer system. Our IT people have really addressed and built up a good system for this. Unfortunately, sometimes things break down. And when that happens, then we go back to snail mail, which takes forever to get jobs done for the families of the deceased. But if we could upgrade our computer system to make it function a little more consistent, well, I think that would be the biggest issue.
Brett, same question.
Well, not working in the office, I can't really say at this point what would be most important. I believe that if I'm elected, I would immediately go in and assess the working relationship that the coroner has with the public and the police and firefighters to help, in any way make the office more efficient. Gary says there's computer issues. I would look into that and basically try to bring it, run the same standards and codes that every other coroner in the state does and do it in as efficient a manner as possible.
All right, our fourth question, Brett, the fun one. You get to ask your opponent a question.
All right. Gary, in looking at the budget for next year, I noticed that there was a drastic increase, like a 250% increase in the additional help line item there, and I was wondering if you could address that.
And he is correct. We had an additional 200%. What that is the commissioners have allowed me to have a part-time position help, which means no more than 19 hours a week. So that's why that jump was. We've already started using that, and it's really making a heck of a difference. That 19 hours a week really allows you to be able to do more than just one thing at a time. So that's why the jump in that account.
Gary, same opportunity. You get to ask your opponent a question.
I guess, Brett, I'm just asking you, and again, it might be like you said earlier, but if you were to become coroner, what changes would you make in the coroner's office to make it, just what changes?
Well, I would, diligently maintain all the county's equipment to the best of the ability of the office, and once again look into efficiencies, whether it's the augmenting the computers, as you said, looking at current standards of record keeping and whatnot, and to hopefully find a way to streamline some of the processes, so hopefully you don't need so much help. And then, once again, build a relationship with the doctors and the hospice care people as well, in order to expedite their end of the deal, so that you're not using time to chase things down that wouldn't necessarily be done for your office if someone else could handle that situation.
Okay, Brett, the next question is for you. The Idaho Constitution states that the coroner is an important part of law enforcement. Please describe that role as you see it.
Well, I believe that the coroner uses their knowledge of those sorts of scenes to determine whether there was any sort of nefarious things going on beyond the capacity of an initial scanning by police or fire departments, and that if that is the case, that they follow the law enforcement chain of custody in order to expedite any things that the police need to include, autopsies or evidence gathering that would be under the care of the coroner's office, and then once again make sure that all legal chains of custody were followed, all reports were filed and forwarded to the proper authorities for any sort of criminal action.
Gary, the Idaho Constitution states that the coroner is an important part of law enforcement. Please describe that role as you see it.
Well, as the statutes state, there's one person that can arrest the sheriff of the county. Guess who that is? But only if there was some issues, and again, there's always yeses and nos to things. But that does put us into a position that, like Brett said, we work very closely with law enforcement. It's a two-way street. We do our job, they do their job, and in the middle we meet. But we are very much involved in all cases, just because we are the coroner for deaths. But we do that in a good way. We have good relationships with the Lewiston Police Department, Nez Perce County Police Department, Tribal Police, FBI. All of those, we've worked with them all, and it works just like it's supposed to.
Gary, the next question. What types of ongoing training are required for this position?
Under the statutes now, a newly elected coroner is supposed to attend a 5-day class in St. Louis. This is paid for by the Idaho State Association of County Coroners. You have 1 year in which to do that. There's also a requirement that you do at least a minimum of 16 hours of continuing ed on an annual basis. So those things can be all accomplished by taking in the classes and doing the training that is offered in the state. We didn't used to have this. So we had 44 counties, 44 coroners doing 44 different things. We've tried to make this so it's more central to everybody. Sure, there's still going to be a small amount of people doing their own thing, but the core of it is what we've set up.
Brett, same question. What types of ongoing training are required for this position?
Well, certainly, like Gary said, you'd have to do the required 16 hours of training, and it would behoove the coroner to do what was offered by the state for efficiency reasons. Other than required stuff, I believe that, being new to the office, if I was to be elected, I would investigate some more forensics, which is kind of matches with what I already know, and get a little more knowledge as far as the investigative side of the equation, and do my best to help out as best I can for any situation that arises.
Okay, thank you. Brett, this may sound like a strange question, but in what circumstances is it necessary to call a coroner?
Well, if a decedent passes somewhere in the county and they are on the county roads or other open areas, a coroner is necessary to pronounce. Anywhere in town where a decedent passes, where they're not under the care of hospice, or if they're not in the hospital, the coroner is necessary to pronounce to make sure that, once again, nothing criminal has been involved, and that everything, chain of custody and vital statistics gathering is done in a correct manner.
Gary, same question. In what circumstances is it necessary to call the coroner?
Coroner needs to be called on any death other than a natural death. That being said, if the person is in the hospital and hasn't been treated for a particular illness or an injury and passes away within 24 hours of going into the hospital, we have to investigate that. We follow up on it. Any death that is not natural, of course, the coroner's office has to respond to that. Basically, any cremation that occurs in the county in which the death occurred, the coroner's office has to investigate that and then sign off for the cremation authorization. That being said, cremation is final interment. We'll get nothing out of anything if it needs to be done. So that's one of our biggest issues is the cremation authorizations.
Okay. Final question for our candidates tonight from our side is, we'll start with Gary. This position may require working under very stressful conditions, as you know. Please describe what those stresses might be and how do you respond to that stress?
Well, that's a very good question. Yes, this job can be stressful. with what you see, with what you have to do. But I think it's in the makeup of the people that do it, and not just me, it can be anybody, is that we know what we need to do, and we go ahead and do it and get it done. Then if we have problems, and unfortunately my wife has had to settle me down a time or two, because things will build up with you. But it's a stressful job, but again, it can also be a very it can be a very nice job. People in the worst part of their times, when their loved one has died, can actually be some of the most open and very nice people to talk to and get the information you need to, but still be friends with them. Not be friends, but be professional with them, but help them through some of the issues. The coroner's office cannot make decisions for them, but we can help them with maybe directions on where to go to get those decisions to be made.
Brett, the same question. This position may require working under very stressful conditions. Please describe those stresses might be, and how would you respond to them?
Well, as Gary stated, it's not no one's happy to see the coroner. Sometimes the situation is very bad, and the family members and others involved are very stressed out. So the coroner would have to be very forthright and get the job part of it done, with a mindful influences about cultural sensitivity, if depending on the decedent's religion or any sort of practices that their community has, they would be, accommodating that absolutely, and still keep the situation under control, and then once again be very, very even-handed and understanding when it comes to people under emotional distress, trying to explain to them the process and helping them out without overstepping your bounds, and letting them know that you're there to take care of their person in their time of need, and assure them that everything will be done properly.
All right. Thank you both, Brett and Gary, and our two candidates for the Nez Perce County coroner race. In our final discussion tonight, we're going to combine the two legislative races, and so all four candidates will get the same question. And remember, if you have any questions for any candidates, please fill them out and pass them to the side. So we're going to introduce the four of them right now. In the District 6 Senate race, our first candidate tonight is challenger Pete Gertensen, a retired mail carrier here in Lewiston. Pete graduated from Lewiston High and Lewis Clark State College and has been an area resident for 57 years. He has served in elected office for the Waha Water District and has been a precinct committee member as well as a Democratic National Committee member. He and his wife, Jareen, have 2 daughters and 5 grandchildren. Pete's opponent is incumbent Senator Dan Johnson, a 22-year resident of Legislative District 6. Dan graduated from the University of Idaho and then earned his master's degree at Virginia Tech. Dan serves as solid waste manager for the city of Lewiston. He is married to Jean and has 6 children and 7 grandchildren. He previously served as commissioner with the Port of Lewiston and was appointed to the Senate in 2011 and is seeking his second elected term. In the race for the District 6 Position B for the House, the challenger is Mike Kingsley, a retired businessman here in Lewiston. Mike is a 1978 graduate of Lewiston High and has certifications in water and fire damage restoration and many ancillary certifications. Mike was raised and spent most of his life here in Lewiston. He and his wife Carolyn have 3 children, and Mike currently serves on the Region 2 Behavioral Health Board of Directors. The incumbent is Dr. John Rushi, a retired children's psych physician. John attended Notre Dame and Washington University in St. Louis before moving to Lewiston in 1980. John has been managing partner at Valley Medical Center and was the healthcare senior vice president for Regents in Utah and Idaho. He and his wife Kay have 1 daughter. Mike has spent 10 years in the House, including 6 as minority leader. He also served on the board of directors for the Idaho Health Insurance Exchange. So welcome to the 4 of you. Questions tonight, and we're going to go in all sorts of orders. It'll be fun mixing it up tonight, so we'll keep you on your toes. That's Perfect.
Yeah.
So we're going to start with Senator Johnson. Why are you seeking this office, and what are your qualifications for this position?
Thank you, Bert, and thank you, League of Women Voters, for sponsoring this forum tonight. It's a pleasure to be here with you. First of all, my wife and Jane have raised our families in this area, and we care very much about the people in this district. I care very much about them and have many good friends and relationships throughout the district. In Boise, I've established a good working relationship with other legislators, Republicans and Democrats. I work well with everyone. I've also earned the respect of the legislative staff and the legislative advisors. I serve on two very important committees, the Tax Committee and the Finance Committee. And as a member of those committees, I have to ensure that taxpayer dollars are used wisely, and I do that. I've made a commitment to education, workforce development, and infrastructure improvement in our state. And I'll continue to work on these and other needs important to the district if reelected. I listen to you. I have a very open door policy. I make a point of returning emails, phone calls, letters, anything I receive, so I'm very accessible for you. Looking into the next session, what I think are probably some key topics coming up. Education is always at the top. Budgets are important. And hopefully we're going to make some progress on transportation this year. So I'm committed to working on those. And for these reasons, I ask for your consideration and support on November 4th. Thank you.
Pete, same question. Why are you seeking this office, and what are your qualifications for this position?
Thank you, Bert. And I want to thank the audience for watching, and particularly these fellow candidates up here. This is a hot seat. This is a hot seat. First 45 minutes have been pretty easy. I've been in public service all my life. I've helped with food banks, organizing food banks, food drives, worked with the Kiwanis Club and other organizations, a board member at the Waha Water Glen. I got involved in this race in the beginning because people weren't being listened to. I've testified twice down there before the legislature about education when they first started these Luna laws. And it fell on deaf ears. And then the following year, I worked all summer long gathering signatures on petitions so that we could put an initiative on the ballot to get these things changed. And statewide, it was voted down 60% to get rid of these Luna laws. The legislature, in their infinite wisdom, turned around and tried to sneak some of that stuff back in 2013. And today we have the same kind of thing coming up again. So I would like to go down there and see if we could get some things straightened out. And I'm excited because I think we're on the crossroads of a new future in Idaho. And I really want to see us move forward. Thank you.
Question now moves to John. Why are you seeking this office, and what are your qualifications for this position?
Thank you, Bert, and thank you to the League of Women Voters, and thank you all for sitting here and listening to us. I think I'm really well qualified for the office. I have served in this office for 10 years. I originally sought the office because of hassles that I had in my practice trying to keep kids healthy with public policy that was not scientific or well informed. And Kay and I talked about it, and we said, when I'm 55 or so, if we can do it, I'll try and enter the realm of public policy to try and improve. Because you can make things better with public policy, or you can sure make it worse with bad public policy. And so that's why I ran the first time. In the time in the legislature, I think I've accomplished a remarkable amount, certainly a lot in the realm of healthcare, but also in process change in contracting and workforce development, ethics in the legislature, and done that in a manner that even though I'm the minority leader, the opposition leader, people respect me and appreciate my approach to problems. So I think I can continue to bring good service to the citizens of District 6.
Mike, same question. Why are you seeking this office, and what are your qualifications for this position?
First off, I'd like to thank the league for having the opportunity here, and also I'd like to thank my family. My 2 boys and my wife are back there, and we recently, my parents are both suffering, and by the way, they're watching on TV. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. They've been having, as elderly get, struggling, and my family's, so I could campaign, they've picked up the pace in helping out with them, and just really appreciate them for all that they're doing. Those 2 people I talk about, my mom and dad, they raised both Steve and I, my brother, who's a pastor, to be very altruistic, to really think of other people. So that's why I'm running. I really think that I can make a difference in changing lives. I'm a businessman. I have a lot of common sense. I've been able to see things differently than other people do and say, why don't we try this? Why don't we do this? Why? And that's worked, and it's worked well. So I think I can bring that to the state. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight, and I have the utmost respect for my opponent. Speaking of family, he helped make a decision when my son was born premature. And John didn't hesitate when it came to walking in there and saying, this kid needs help, let's get him to Spokane. I have the utmost respect for John, and I thank him for giving me the opportunity to debate him tonight. Thank you.
Our second question, Pete, we'll start with you. Currently, the state legislature has chosen not to expand Medicaid. What is your position on this issue?
Well, Mr. Havens alluded to this a little bit earlier. I believe the county budget is about $1 million for indigent care a year. And I've been looking into it, and it's my understanding that there's $90-some million on the table, and the federal government was going to do that for about the first 3 years and then back off to 90% thereafter. So it seems to me that if we could get more people insured, and so they don't have to worry about their medical bills, then they're going to be in a lot better position. I've gone door to door in, oh gosh, this whole district, and I've ran across several people who are right on that borderline, who are at that point where they need the help, and their money is going towards that. So if we have affordable health care, people can afford to go to the doctor, it's just a better deal for everybody. I read another article where it was supposed to be something like $3.3 billion in economic activity from this if we go ahead and accept Medicaid expansion. And I don't see anything wrong with having a healthy Idaho citizens. Thank you.
John, you're next. Currently, the state legislature has chosen not to expand Medicaid. What is your position on this issue?
Thanks, Bert. I've been supportive of the expanding coverage to low-income adults, those that are working but unable to afford insurance, since that option became available to us through the Affordable Care Act. It comes down to this. It's a no-brainer to my mind. It saves lives and it saves money. It, in addition, brings billions into the Idaho economy, as Pete mentioned, and each year, over the next 10, it would bring as much into the Idaho economy as is brought in by the Idaho National Laboratory. Now, nobody's saying we should turn away the Idaho National Laboratory, but when it comes to accepting money to take care of low-income health care, suddenly we're worried about the feds running out of money. I think that's a false economy. So I think it saves lives, it saves money, and it will save us in property taxes through county expenses. It will save us in state expense for mental health corrections, and of course the costs that we're putting into the indigent fund for catastrophic health care. So, any questions?
Yeah. Mike, you're up next. Currently, the state legislature has chosen not to expand Medicaid. What's your position on this issue?
Well, I agree with John. I've looked at it thoroughly. What we're talking about is 16% of able-bodied men, basically, that aren't covered. But if you really track this and look at it, most of these gentlemen are suffering from addiction. And I am a firm, committed person to this is something that we can fix. You know, if we get these people some help, you know, we spend the small amount of money that it takes to get them some coverage, I think that straightens their lives out. It might even change generations. So, and I've looked at it, and you know, I just think that it's time that it takes the money off the CAT system. And every way I've looked at it, I agree. I think it's time that we look at that. I've also looked at Hoosier Care back in Indiana with Mike Spence. I think we could do something in that direction where it's still state controlled. I think we could have Spud Care. I don't know what you would call it, but you know, something where we could keep it on the state level.
Thank you. Dan, you're up. Currently, the state legislature has chosen not to expand Medicaid. What is your position on this issue?
Thank you, Bert. I have been in support of expanding Medicaid, but not without discussion on reform. There's a lot of things in the Medicaid program nationwide that we need to look at that need some reform. And I think by doing that, it's possible to expand that and even lower our costs. And I believe that. And that would take some work on our part. We would have to apply for some kind of a waiver with the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services to do that. But I have to believe that we have the people here in Idaho, the citizens, the legislators, the agency personnel, that we could come up with something creative enough to where we're going to address the needs of these populations that need help. And by doing that, of course, we improve access to health care, which I think is very important. We begin to serve other populations that I think sometimes we assume already have health care. For example, our vets. Not all vets have health care through the Veterans Administration. So this would give us an opportunity to work with some of those populations, which I think is very positive. And then the dollars that Representative Rushi mentioned, and Mr. Kingsley, there is a potential, to save some money, and actually at the county level too, where if we can do that and take some of that burden off the property taxpayer. So I think it's well worth the look, and we need to have that discussion.
Thank you. Just a reminder, we're taking questions from the audience. We're gathering them down here. Just remember that the opponent also will answer the same question if you're directing it at somebody. So try to keep the questions a little more general than pointed as they come in. Our third question is a little bit longer one, so if you need it read a couple times, we can certainly do that. It concerns the Constitution of the State of Idaho, especially Article 9, the Education and School Land states. Section 1, legislature to establish system of free schools. The stability of a Republican form of government depending mainly upon the intelligence of the people, it shall be the duty of the legislature of Idaho to establish and maintain a general, uniform, and thorough system of public, free, common schools. The question is, how would you propose that the legislature comply with this constitutional requirement? John, we're going to start with you.
Thank you, Bert. I have fought long and hard for us understanding and fulfilling our constitutional requirement to the public and to the public school students. Even the governor has said we likely are not fulfilling their constitutional duties. And it has been really hard to serve in the legislature for the last 5 or 6 years as the funding for education drops. We're now still about $100 million short, $100 million short of where we were 5 to 6 years ago. So are we fulfilling our duty? No, we are not. What does it take? Well, gee, it's going to take money. And I think that that is something that the legislature is required to do. In Washington, the Supreme Court there says that the legislature has to do and find the funding. Our Supreme Court has said the legislature should find the funding and go ahead and do it. And in the meantime, our schools have 4-day week. We have crowded classrooms. We have a low rate of going on to higher education. And we have the outcome, long-term outcome of having the lowest wages in the country. I think we have a moral and a constitutional duty to refund education.
Mike, you're up next, and if you need the question repeated, I'd be happy to repeat it for you.
No, I understand. Education is vital. It's when we do have to fund it. And where are we going to get the funds? Where's the money going to come from? We're going to have to either raise taxes or we're going to have to look within the system itself. I believe we can look within the system itself. As I mentioned about addiction, and we lock up so many people who are sick. We can capture that money. We spend $30,000 to $50,000 a year to lock someone up. Why can't we get them the help? And I'm not talking about violent criminals and that. I'm talking increasing drug courts, getting that money, getting the money that we spend on prisoners, get them the help, get them back into sober living facilities, get them some help so that they can start moving forward with their lives. We can, I think it was in 1974, there was 300,000 people in prison. Now there's 2.3 million. And that's just in a 40-year period. And our prisons have to be top-notch now. There's not like they can just be out in an open field. These are serious costs on our society in every realm. So I think that's where we can look to get our money and help people.
Dan, you're batting third.
Thank you, Bert. Well, education, we need to put more dollars into education. I don't think there's any dispute about that. And certainly when I've gone back and looked at the numbers, it appears that starting in about 2006, when we decoupled the O&M from our property taxes and replaced that with the sales tax increase, that funding did not keep up with that. And if you chart the two, you can see that it begins to fall further and further behind year after year. So that's a concern of mine. In terms of some of the actions that we've taken in the past 2 to 3 years, we have increased funding for education. That's the good news. General fund revenues have been up, and I expect that we'll do that again next year as the revenues continue to meet projections. But I also want to tie this back to the workforce development too, because I think it's very critical in this state that if we're going to grow revenues, grow our personal incomes, we're going to have to look at diversifying our workforce, and we're going to have to look at diversifying our businesses, the economy that's here. So put some money into workforce development. And just kind of a side note, for whatever it's worth, but in 2012 to 13, Idaho led the nation in personal income growth as a percentage. And then the first 2 quarters of this year, we're in the top 10. So that's good for Idaho, but we still need to do more to develop our workforce and to bring new business into the state that pays higher wages. We got to do it. And then by having those tax revenues, I think it'll help us with the funding.
Thank you. Pete?
Thank you. Article 9, free and thorough system of public schools. I mean, that's pretty hard to misinterpret. We have 94 school districts in this state that are subsidized with levies. So every time we have a levy, that's you and I paying for it. And if we had things the way they should be, there shouldn't be any levies. Part of the problem, I think, is, like Dan mentioned, back in 2006, then temporary Governor Risch brought together the legislature for a period of time in August, and they moved the 3 mills off the property tax, which saved businesses $100 million, but they put it back onto the sales tax, which cost us more money in sales tax. So maybe revisiting that, reversing that, that would probably pick up our $100 million that John Rushi was talking about that we're short with. Another thing is, it was alluded to, is the trade schools. Not everybody fits in the same square peg. There's some round ones out there, and there's some triangular ones out there. And you give me a screwdriver, and I'm going to hurt myself. But trade schools are something that's in need. Welders, pipe fitters, those kinds of things. There's people out there that have those skills, and they just need a place to develop them and get certification. Thank you.
Fourth question tonight. You hear a lot about the minimum wage, both nationally and locally. So what is your position on the movement to increase Idaho's minimum wage? Mike, we're going to start with you.
I believe minimum wage is probably right about where it should be. A wage should be a contract between an employer and a person. When we start messing with the minimum wage and saying this is what things could cost, I think that it just makes business very difficult. And being a businessman, when we did start people out at minimum wage, it was for a very short time. We were always looking where can we move them to increase their knowledge so that they could increase. I just think that another thing too is that people don't understand the cost associated with raising wages. There's workers' comp, there's FICA, there's liability insurance, all that's based on wages. So when you start piling that on top of business, it all adds up to where, and business works on very fine margins. I know everybody thinks that you can just tax businesses, you can tax business. No, it's just not like that. You have to be in there to understand how margins are thin. And so I think the minimum wage is something that in Idaho is just where it should be, and we should make it even to the point where youth could work for less wages to grow into better jobs and training.
Dan, you're up next. What's your position on the movement to increase Idaho's minimum wage?
Thank you, Bert. Well, I would take a position that I think the minimum wage could probably take a little bit of a bump. I can't tell you how much that would be, but certainly one of the concerns that I would have is that we give a full disclosure of what the impacts are going to be by doing that. So I wouldn't just do that blindly without talking to lots of interested and affected groups and individuals, such as the businesses. And I think it's fair to do that. We hear talk about by raising wages, maybe we're going to automate jobs and we'll lose positions. I mean, I suppose that's a possibility. I also agree with Mr. Kingsley about business owners. They value and they know their employees. So I want to put trust in that system too. And I have to believe that a lot of them will pay more than a minimum wage as the employee spends more time there. I think that's just kind of a given. In terms of sometimes you hear about minimum wages, and then by paying a minimum wage, then we're also subsidizing families, with benefits, public benefits. And there's some truth to that. I know there is, but as we begin to look at raising these minimum wages, that also affects the benefit package that families are going to receive. So I've spoken with folks at the Health and Welfare Department to get some different scenarios that I can study and look at that. So I think there's going to be a lot of moving parts out there. It's not going to happen by itself. So I think a full discussion and then a disclosure of those impacts so that we can make an informed decision before we do that would be warranted. Thank you.
Pete?
Well, it would be nice if it was a perfect world, but it's not. To me, minimum wage means you have a minimum consumer. You have a minimum customer. And somewhere along the line, we've lost sight of that. If we're not paying people what they can live on, then they don't have any discretionary income, and they become non-customers, non-consumers. And businesses find themselves with a downturn in sales. We need to stimulate economic growth, and why are we stimulating economic growth if it's not for a person? I avoid the self-checkout lines at Home Depot and Albertsons. How many times have you seen one of those machines spend money in the community? Very, very little. So I would like to see the minimum wage go up, but again, you just can't raise the thing willy-nilly without talking to the business owners and finding out what their situation is. I read an article on 13 states that did raise the minimum wage. And what they're finding out there is, costs went up a little bit, but they're also finding that more job growth has been spurred by that because the people are now having a discretionary income. They can go out to dinner more. They can spend more. So, maybe it's time that we try a different approach. Thank you.
John?
Thanks, Bert. Just to kind of follow up with Dan, I agree that the minimum wage is too low to support a family, but I'm not sure that the minimum wage was ever designed to support a family. But just as a point of fact, if we have somebody who's working a minimum wage for a full year, we subsidize that through federal and state services they make $7.25 an hour. We subsidize that at $4.75 an hour. If you add in the food stamps, the child care, the Medicaid, and all of the other social services that we end up paying as taxes. So it seems to me that we're going to pay it somehow. And I think that paying it as wages, as Pete says, would more than likely increase the economy by having that money turn over. It's interesting, here in Lewiston, the minimum wage across the border is significantly higher, and I will bet that there are very few people that have long-term employees that are paid minimum wage here. Because, you know, you look at it, wouldn't you go over and get $9 an hour instead of $7.25? So I think that minimum wage is in many ways artificial in our marketplace here. In some places, I think it could be beneficial to the economy. Certain businesses would be hurt by it, and so it would take a lot of study. But, you know, the data does show that when you put more money into the economy, it circulates more, and it helps particularly small businesses.
Thank you, John. So we'll take the kid gloves off and let Dan start first. You get to ask your opponent a question.
Thank you, Bert. Pete, just a real simple question. You know, as a Republican, I had to go through many tests, if you will, and one of them had to do with the Republican platform. So what I would like to ask you is there anything in the Democrat platform that you would change? And if so, what would that be, and how would you change that?
Well, at the last convention, we went through that, and we did adopt a platform, but we adopted a very broad platform that we could all live with. You know, I can't really think of it. It was a good document that we came up with, and we put it in English and Spanish and the whole works and broadcasted it out there. No, Dan, I think it's a good platform. Thank you. We certainly didn't say that the legislature should be electing senators.
All right. Pete, we get to reverse it, and you get to ask Dan a question.
Well, tonight we had a public hearing, one of 3 in the state, with the Idaho State Board of Education, and they're right next door here at the same time this was going on. So Dan, for those teachers that live in our district that weren't able to attend this meeting, could you explain your positions on the tier certification for teachers that's being proposed?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Pete. My position on tiered licensure is that falls under the Education Task Force recommendation from Governor Otter's group, and I have supported those 20 recommendations. It was a 31-member task force. They had 20 recommendations, and I said I would support those recommendations. And as it comes down to tiered licensure, that's currently being negotiated and looked at. And I know there's some concerns that one group has anyway with how that may be used for, say, future promotion and/or keeping your license. So I'll support the process as long as the 2 groups are working together. I've committed to doing that. I have the support of the teachers on my position, working with the task force recommendations. So with that, I'll just let the group work and see what product they come up with.
Thank you. John, would you like to ask your opponent a question?
Thanks, Bert. Mike, your commercials call me a tax and spend liberal, although I challenge you to find and identify votes in which I raise taxes. You know, you can't cut taxes, refund education, provide the basic services of government, including increased services for addiction. And I can't see how you can do that and cut taxes. So would you explain how that works for you?
Well, could you, I guess the phone interrupted what I was like.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure, I can do it again.
Okay, I appreciate it. Yeah.
You called me a tax and spend liberal.
Right.
Although
okay.
I challenge you to find
a
vote where I raise taxes.
Okay.
You can't to my mind, you can't cut taxes, but also refund education, provide basic governmental services, and increase funding for addiction services.
Sure.
So explain how that happens in your mind.
Well, like I said, you get into places where there's tons of waste and start cutting. You start finding out, why are we doing this? And as far as calling a tax and spend liberal, the reason that you haven't really voted for any tax increases is because the legislature is Republican and they won't even bring it up. But then when you have been able to, you've said, yes, that's a good way to do it, is either increase taxes in some way. But yeah, as far as there being legislation, I can't find any, and I did look for it. It's just because it doesn't come up. Yeah, but and back to it, funding to me is a bit of going into finding ways that we can save money in the general fund. Elderly example, let's try to figure out how to keep their elderly in their homes. Let's try to figure out, instead of putting them into Medicaid or into, where we're having to pay for them, there's got to be some alternatives. So that's the way I'm looking at it.
Mike, you get to ask a question now.
Well, and speaking of, John, I'd like to know, Project Vote Smart is a website that was, it's an organization put together by the Carter administration, but on there's a listing of conservative votes. And most of the Republicans that you look at in the legislature are at 80 to 100%. You're at 8%. Can you explain to me why you would vote? And your literature says moderation. I would think moderate would be around 50%. Can you explain why that would be 8%?
Well, Mike, all of those ratings are done for a certain purpose, whether you talk about Planned Parenthood, you talk about the NRA, or you talk about Idaho Freedom Foundation and their conservative ratings. So I can't tell you why I was rated at 8% unless you tell me what those votes were. But I will commit to you, as we discussed with House Bill 219, that there are reasons, there's good reasons. I won't vote for an unconstitutional bill. That's a waste of money and a waste of time. And then after that, I look to whether it's beneficial to my community. Whether guns on, and I take the input from people. Guns on campus is an example. That was constitutional. But nobody wanted it, or almost nobody wanted it. Not the teachers, not the students, not the parents, not the administrators, not the Board of Education. The comments I had were 30 to 1 against. So I voted against it. Is that a bad vote on a conservative rating scale? Probably is. Is it the right vote? I firmly believe it was.
Okay. Moving on, question number 6. How would you propose to increase funding for new roads, bridge construction, and repairing Idaho's unsafe road and bridges? We're going to start with Pete.
Well, it's my understanding we're $500 million behind. And the legislature has borrowed the Garvey funds to the maximum, so they can't get any more there. Man. Possibly, the only thing I could think of is maybe trying to figure out who uses the roads the most and make sure that everyone is paying their fair share for that. There was a group that did a study several years ago and figured out, well, not everyone's paying their fair share. Citizens seem to be paying more of their share. So it's a tough one, and I really don't have a good answer of where all that money's going to come from. Hopefully, hopefully there's a lot smarter people than I am, but we need to do something. It's just craziness. The Lenore Bridge, the Cherry Lane Bridge, going across that is about the craziest thing I've ever seen in my whole life. And why are we putting up with that kind of stuff? I've listened to some 5-year plans that the ITD has come up with, and they have a grip on things, and they're trying to improve and do the best they can. So things are going to change, but you can't do it overnight. And I wish I had a really good, swift answer for you, but I don't.
John, you're up next. How would you propose to increase funding for new roads?
Well, I think that multiple assessments, including a really thorough one done by Lieutenant Governor Lieutenant Governor Little, showed that we're about $250 million a year short of meeting our maintenance requirements. That doesn't talk about new construction replacement. And a lot of that is in the counties and in the cities because we share highway funds with them. We have not raised the fuel tax since 1993 for the federal portion or since 1996 for the state portion. And everybody knows that cars are just as fuel efficient now as they were back in 1993, right? So we even have cars that are hybrids and electric that use almost no fuel and therefore pay no fuel tax. So I think we have to short-term increase fuel tax, increase registration, taking into account the fact that some vehicles do not pay. I think we also need to look at the cost trucks pay. And why do we have to do this? Because this is an asset that was given to us. It's important for the economy and the future economy of the state, and we should be passing this legacy on to our kids. We shouldn't be consuming it and letting it deteriorate. So I think, yeah, we got to pay more.
Mike?
Well, God blessed Idaho with beautiful mountains, and unfortunately, we have to get over those mountains with our roads. So to keep economically involved in our trucks running, we have to have good roads and safe roads. So with that, I would support a gas tax. And there's just really no other option. The people that are using it the most should pay the most.
Dan?
Well, thank you, Bert. Well, I have a couple of ideas that I scratched down here that I have brought up with the transportation committees in both the Senate and the House, and it just takes time, I guess, sometimes to have your ideas heard. But one of them is the local option tax on gasoline. And this is a possibility, and there's been a couple of local option bills that have been floating around the legislature in the last 2 years. They haven't gone far, but it's a possibility. And basically, it would just work region by region in the state. If a region wanted to raise their tax and then they'd get 100% of that money back and dedicate it to roads and bridges, they could do that, or buying equipment for local highway district or training, things like that, they could do that. Representative Farush, you mentioned the electric car. They don't pay that, but maybe we can look at a voltage tax, where they have to pay based on volts, Very creative, but it's a pretty easy number to get and easy to track. Something like a reverse fuel surcharge. So as the price of gasoline gets cheaper, the tax goes up. If I'm paying 50 cents a gallon less for gas and the price goes up a penny a gallon or 2 cents a gallon, I don't feel it as much. I'm still paying 48 cents a gallon less. And to the extent that we can drive energy policy or gas prices down to do that and assist that, I think would help. Penny a pound, some of the bigger trucks, the heavier loads, we need to charge more for some of those registration fees that they get, like the super load, stuff like that. And I think that's very possible. Public-private partnerships, that might be another way to leverage some money where we can do roads and not pay for those directly or immediately with the tax revenues. A good example is the Cabela's interchange up by Post Falls. That was a public-private partnership, and it's working well, where any excess tax revenues are going to pay for that interchange.
Thank you. So we make sure we save enough time for questions. This will be the final one for the four of you. What is the most pressing issue facing the state of Idaho, in your opinion, and how do you plan to address it if you are elected? John, we're going to start with you.
Thank you, Bert. I think the most pressing issue for the state of Idaho is the low-wage spiral that Idaho is caught in. The fact that we have low wages, therefore we have low receipts for local and state government. We have poor training because people can't afford to send themselves or their kids on to higher education. And if you are able to get trained, you look at leaving the state, Salt Lake, Portland, Seattle, or maybe even the Balkan oil fields to develop a career and make enough money. So I think the low-wage spiral is the biggest problem that we have. Unfortunately, there is no short-term fix. Would increasing the minimum wage help a little bit? I don't know. But the real answer is to develop good jobs, and that relies highly on education and training in technical work so that we can have the workforce. Over and over and over again, people have told me the problem in Idaho, I love it here, but I can't get the workforce I need. And that's what we need to take care of.
Thank you. Mike?
Great jobs. It's what people need, you know, and being an entrepreneur myself, I know how difficult it is to start up business, to get those fledgling businesses going. But boy, once they take off, it's just a beautiful thing. I think of the Seekins, the young man and lady up in the Port District by the airport, started out building scope rings for guns, and now they're producing the highest quality AR rifles, employing like 60 people, and those kind of stories are fantastic, and we're ripe for growth right here. I know we've done some wonderful things with our Port District and getting ready for entrepreneurs to take off. So we need to encourage that. We need to get those people fired up and moving forward with the education that they need to go to work in those companies. You know, they even talked about needing people to understand their machines that they operate with. So we need that education, and so we need to put money and our efforts towards that. So really, that's what it is create jobs and keep them coming in so people can stay here and make a great living wage and live in the best place on earth. So this is it. Thanks.
Dan, what do you feel the most pressing issues facing the state of Idaho is? I'm sorry, Dan, what do you feel the most pressing issue is facing the state of Idaho, and how do you plan to address it?
Well, thank you, Bert. Well, it's a common theme up here, but for me, it's workforce development. And sometimes that's not as straightforward as it might sound. And the example I'm going to use is in the healthcare field, where maybe we go out and we recruit folks who maybe are representing different cultures, different backgrounds in our community so that they can go out and serve those populations who maybe don't have the access, or there's a cultural barrier or language barrier, something like that, but we can do that and expand the access of our health care and the services that we provide. And so, you know, it could be something like that. It could be the Department of Labor's, where they have a new program where you can go out and post your resume online, and then Idaho Department of Labor will take that resume and they will try to match it up with the job opening in the state. And again, we're trying to build certain sectors. We can get these workforce development funds from the Department of Labor, depending on what sector of the economy you're in, and you can get a scored application, I guess, or a rank for this, where you may qualify, say, for $4,000 or $4,500 grant to help recruit employees in that field. You know, if you don't score as high, you're going to get something less. But anything that has to do with workforce development, I think, is going to help drive our economy. I think that's pretty important to revenues, to our budgets, and then ultimately funding, too, down the road.
Thank you. Pete?
Well, our future is in our children, and if we don't hang on to them and keep them in this state, then I don't see us going very far. Education, my grandson's going to Montana State, and I'm a little sad about that, and from there he'll probably leave Idaho. So we need to have education and training, and that's been said before, but we also need to make sure we have the infrastructure in place for transportation to move product in and out of this state. And I've heard stories of some people who say, you know, it's just hard to get things in and out of here. So we need that kind of thing going on. I really think we're at a crossroads, and we're at a point where we have such a great state, and we love it here, and to keep our public lands and our way of life is a treasure. And I think we all in this room appreciate that, and to make sure our kids have a future in this state and want to come back and provide jobs. People will come here and they'll say, you know, it's nice, but it smells a little bit coming over the hill. That could be cleaned up. All kinds of things could happen. But I really think children are our future, and we need to provide them with the training so that those companies that can locate here will have a workforce. And that's part of the big problem right now.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the audience portion of the questions, and we have a bunch here, but feel free to fill out more questions and pass them to the end of the aisle, and we'll collect more. Our first question is for our 4 legislators. Do you or would you support legislation to allow a local option tax for school facilities? And Mike, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think it's probably the only way that it's going to get built, so I would support it. But it has to be defined for a certain period of time, and then we need to get rid of it as soon as we did. And I do compliment the last one we did for the jail, that we did keep our word, because it's easy when taxes start coming in to go, oh, let's just keep it going. And proud of the people in charge that made that decision. But we need to define it, and we need to be done with it as soon as our beautiful new high school is built.
Dan?
Thank you, Bert. I too support local option taxes, but if I were looking at this from a legislative standpoint, I think I would consider more than, say, just a local option tax for building schools. I would look at something that would consider maybe a package of projects that you could vote on as the electorate. So you might say, well, I'm going to vote for this, I'm going to vote for this, I'm going to vote for that, and you have local option taxing authority. Then you may have to spread that money out or spend that money around. But to run a single bill like that, I don't know that that would work. But I think just looking at local option authority for local governments, I certainly would entertain that, yes.
Pete?
This question was asked to Thera Stevenson a year ago, and she said, well, local option taxes are just not a priority of the legislature. And that idea has been kicked around for about 10 years. Whether it's education or putting in a bridge or maybe building a library or something, it seems to me that if we truly believe that citizens and the government's too big and citizens can manage their own affairs, shouldn't we be able to make a sound decision on whether we want to tax ourselves for some project along the way? And I think the legislature ought to be able to provide communities with local options.
John?
Yeah, I've supported the ability of local units of government to choose how they fund themselves within the limits of the law. Currently, the only way that local governments can fund themselves is either through their operations, their enterprises, or through property tax. And, well, unless you're a resort community, right? Or unless you had the special bill for a jail. So it just doesn't make sense. And there's so many differences throughout the state. For example, Oregon doesn't have a sales tax. So county next to Oregon may not want to have a local option sales tax, but they may want to have a bed tax, or they may want to have. Here, we're facing, what is it, 8.5 across the way? And so a quarter cent or a half cent here might not interfere with significantly with the flow of business. So I think local option is good, and I agree that it should not just be for school facilities. It should be for community facilities, whether it's a new firehouse or a new water treatment plant, a library, or a school. Whatever the community wants, they should be able to do it. But we should have some limit on what that size is. We don't want a 10-cent local option tax, that's for sure.
Thank you. Ron, Doug, you guys doing okay over there? Because it's been a little while since so we're coming back to you now, okay? Okay, just making sure. Please explain the maintenance you plan to do for the county courthouse and how you would plan to pay for it. Ron, we're going to start with you.
Well, I believe that, as Doug alluded to earlier, that all the third floor is being used for right now is storage. When I was there, we looked at hiring the red shirts to come in and help demolish all of the walls of the old jail, get rid of all the steel tank that's up there. And that's a pretty cheap way to get some labor done to open up that whole third floor up there. It's a type of construction where all those walls could pretty much come out, and then you could then slowly rebuild what you need to rebuild to make it a useful third floor. Get rid of all the excess old piping and that sort of thing. And the way to fund it is just a little bit at a time. I mean, it's got to be done, or it's just not fair to the employees that work in that building.
Doug, your thoughts?
Thanks, Bert. That's a great question. We've looked at doing several things on the third floor. Currently, it is just storage. It's going to take a lot of work. We've looked at small projects and larger utilization of different areas. The question is it worth it? We're talking about an over 100-year-old building. Now, can I justify putting millions of dollars into that? I know Mr. Whitman has said, it can be done cheaply with red shirt labor, but even that costs money, and it takes time. We are currently waiting for a study that has been completed by an independent inspector looking at major issues, structural issues, plumbing and wiring, things like that. That report is actually due this week. In the meantime, we've done some projects that we can afford, but we have not utilized the third floor. There are serious plumbing issues up there, serious wiring issues. And as far as just knocking out walls, we're talking about concrete that is massive. Iron bars from the cells up there. I mean, it's not a simple thing to do. I have a background in construction. I had my own home inspection business. There is a process for determining how much money you want to put into an aged building. And we're going to determine if it's valuable enough to do that and if the structure itself can sustain it. And preliminary reports are it's not as bad as we thought it is. So we'll see what comes in the report.
Thank you. For our coroner's race, the question is, as coroner, you will unfortunately see many results of deaths caused by DUIs. Do you think there is anything you can do to reduce these deaths? Gary, we'll start with you.
Unfortunately, in the coroner's office, I don't know that there is anything that we can do to make a significant make things work. I'm all for being able to help take care of that because unfortunately we do have a high amount of DUI traffic fatalities and death. But as the coroner itself, I don't see how we would be able to help alleviate that.
Brett, for you?
Well, I agree with Gary to a certain extent. I would hope that in the course of being a public servant or whatever, you would take the opportunity to espouse your concern about that, because that's a senseless waste of life right there, and basically just follow through with the duties of the office, because one of the coroner's duties is to adequately fill out that death certificate with precipitous events, and that promotes the spending of government funds. So if you make sure you do the paperwork correctly, more funding should come into the community for that sort of national prevention, and to maybe follow up on that and say, hey, our region has more of these incidents, and therefore we need more money for education to hopefully bring those numbers down.
Go back to our two legislative races. Question for the four of you. Small business is at the heart of Lewiston's economy. How would you help bring more startups, ma and pa shops, jet boat companies, ammunitions, etc., to the valley? Dan, we'll start with you.
Well, thank you, Bert. Well, I think the best thing we can do is just to have fair regulations, fair policies, a good tax structure that would invite businesses to come to Idaho and set that up. So to that extent, we'd look at, broadening that tax base a little bit, certainly look at things that would impact the insurance rates that companies pay, anything like that, workman's comp, that we can make it more competitive. I think some of that is going to be local too, where the local community is going to have an investment in that, and they're going to have the infrastructure in place to be ready to go, if you will, shovel-ready projects. But again, I think from a state level, we just have to have good regulations, fair regulations. They have to be understandable for the companies. They have to be clear so they know what they're dealing with, that they're predictable, they can make investments, and they know what the future is going to be.
Thank you. Pete?
Well, maybe we're lucky a little bit here because we do have a minimum wage of 9 something across the river, and so there is a little competition there. If you've taken a look at downtown Lewiston, the beautification project there, I think that's wonderful. And it has revitalized downtown Lewiston. It's becoming a place to go to. And I think that kind of a thing can really help out a lot. There's another guy who is out in the incubator part out in North Lewiston, and he was offered a lot of money to move his business to La Crosse, Washington. He says that the jumping through the hoops here, trying to get a business started in Lewiston is very difficult. So again, the regulations, or at least, give a person the ground rules and say, this is it, this is what you need to do. But he was telling me that he's had a heck of a time trying to get something going here in Lewiston. We need to make it a little bit easier. I mean, yeah, you do need to make sure the zonings and all the laws are followed, but it should be an easy process, or an easier process. We have wineries that are taking off in this area. My goodness, we could become the Italy of Idaho right here. We have so much potential here, and a future. And I like to see the way that things are going. And if you happen to live 15 miles out of town like I do, and I'm seeing that starting to take off and grow. So this area of impact that you guys talk about in the county it's going to be at my front step pretty quick, I think.
John?
Thanks, Bert. What I've learned from the businesses that I've worked in, and also people that have talked to me over the last 10 years, is that there's a lot of things that goes into the choice of where you expand your business or where you settle your business, and it somewhat depends on what your business is. But the basic things are infrastructure, including land to pour a pad on, or roads to get into, and that I think is our urban renewal district and our ports to prepare that for those companies. We need telecom. We really do. Lewiston isn't too bad, but once you get outside, it's really hard to meet the telecom needs of the 21st century in most of Idaho. We need workforce and rapid training. LCSC, of course, provides a lot of that, but we could do more in our school districts. We need to have available capital. We need to have flexible, efficient government so that siting and planning and zoning isn't difficult. We need to have a predictable tax structure so that you can build a 5 to 7 year business plan. And we need to have attractive communities with schools that are open 5 days a week. With parks, yes, and other amenities that people expect in a community. It's hard to say, come bring your company here, our school is open fully 4 days a week. I mean, that's just not very attractive, but that is what is happening in 40 school districts in the state of Idaho.
I'm sorry, John, I got to cut you off. Mike?
Okay. Well, these guys covered it pretty well. It's really cool to see the number of businesses that are coming here that are from other businesses. For instance, like Schweitzer, with all he's done, there's ancillary businesses that are coming in because of that. And our same with our bullet manufacturing, what Hal Machine is doing and growing. So it's really neat to see that happening. I think we could encourage that. And then, like I said before, it's pretty amazing what we do have here, and that we have invested in the infrastructure that businesses are ready. I mean, or we could get them ready very quickly. But we do need to cut the amount of paperwork that's involved in startups, and also helping people get financing. That's a big issue. With the recession, a lot of people maxed out their credit cards. They're kind of in a situation where they can't get a loan. So we need to work on ways to increasing that so that businesses can start up.
Thank you. Back to the commissioner race. The commissioners oversee the juvenile detention. What do each of you foresee in the future for this facility? Doug, we'll start with you.
Okay, thanks. That's a good question. When we had a joint powers agreement with the 4 other counties, I sat on that board as a representative for Nez Perce County. We no longer have that type of agreement anymore. We do provide the service to the other counties if they so choose. It's under contract now. Latah County has chosen to go with Kootenai County Juvenile Detention Center. What do I see in the future? Well, it's no secret that when I came on, the Juvenile Detention Center was drowning in red ink. That was one of the first things I heard from the county clerk. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in the red, consistently. In years past, it was never like that. It actually broke even or actually was in the black from time to time. But things changed. And so we had to make some changes. We actually had a new director come on, and we've made changes in how he staffs and, of course, the rates that we charge. Everything from money we receive through grants, services we provide in counseling. And I worked very hard to keep the detention center here. You might remember reading that at one time the commissioners looked at moving our juveniles out of state to another facility. Didn't want to do that, but couldn't really figure out a way how to afford what we had. Well, we figured out a way to save some money. We're still a little bit in the red, but much better than we were 4 years ago.
Ron, same question?
Could you repeat it, please?
Sure. The commissioners oversee the juvenile detention. What do you foresee in the future for this facility?
It's a needed facility. I think one of the things that kind of goes back to the forefront of that is the commissioner's support for the Valley Boys and Girls Club. If you can get those kids into a decent program after school, they're not getting into trouble, and the detention center isn't needed. One of the reasons it was in the black all the time, or in the red all the time, was the fact that from what we were told is that the judges in other counties basically knew those counties couldn't afford to send their kids down here to Lewiston, so they weren't giving them any juvenile detention time. So that was hurting the county, and it was hurting the operation. That was through no fault of the previous director. It was through no fault of the commissioners. When that facility was built, I think the intention was for it to be staffed and used by all 5 counties, and that just kind of fell apart. So my thought is we need to keep it there, but I think there are other alternatives of ways that we can get it back into the black by teaching our kids that they don't need to be there in the first place.
Thank you. For our 4 legislative candidates, what does the recent gay marriage court ruling mean for the state moving forward? Pete, we're going to start with you.
Well, thank you, Bert. Well, it's a ruling, and that's what it is. You know, the idea of a traditional family, someone asked me that the other day, and I don't know anymore. A lot of single mothers out there, a lot of single fathers out there, and they fall into the same place. A lot of married couples, men and women, that are struggling. So whether it's gay, single, men, women, I think it's just time that we all got along, really. And it's about time that the state legislature just added the words. Thank you.
John?
I agree with Pete. It's settled law now, as of tomorrow morning, when the county starts giving licenses throughout the state. And I guess that there is an appeal, but based on what the Supreme Court has done in other jurisdictions, I don't think they'll take it up. So it is settled law that our constitutional prohibition is null and void. But I do also agree with Pete that we still have a hole in how we treat people, and I don't think that any of us believes that people should have a lesser chance for a job or a home And so I do think that those protections need to be included into the Idaho Human Rights Act. And I suspect that that will come up this year.
Mike?
People of faith, you know, that aspect of this needs to be respected as well. And I think that, as Pete says, that we get along, but, you know, please, you know, take into consideration, you know, people's hearts and how they've been raised, and, you know, their faith is very important to them. And so we're going to have this going on for a while, but, you know, we need to work it out, and we need to respect the people that, you know, this really does have an effect on with their faith. And I personally am glad it's settled. You know, it's a law now, and it's something that we have to live with. And as a legislator, I will respect that. But let's be kind. Thanks.
Dan?
Bert, would you repeat the question,
Sure.
please? Thank you.
What does the recent court ruling on gay marriage mean for the state moving forward?
Thank you. Well, I agree with all the panelists up here. It's the law of the land, and beginning tomorrow morning, we're going to see marriage license issued across the state. And as a elected official, it would be my duty to uphold the law and to not interfere in that process. So that's what we're asked to do, and that's what we have to do. There's going to be some other changes, obviously, that the state has to go through. We're going to have to rewrite some other laws, a law that we passed as recently as last year. But it was in the Constitution, and that's now been declared null and void. So I think the state will move forward. I think folks are going to work together on this, and I think we're going to be all right. So.
Okay. For our commissioners, how do you think the county should pay off the jail bond if no new jobs or the economy tanks? Ron, we're going to start with you.
Well, we're committed to make those payments. We need to definitely re-examine the annual budget and make cuts where we can make cuts. That we made a promise to the taxpayers of the county that we would just run that sales tax for 10 years, which I disagreed with. The state of Idaho redid the Capitol building and financed that for 20 years, but they restricted counties to 10. It would be a simple fix to pay for it if we were allowed to have the full 20 years. And if it did get paid off and paid down, then we would automatically drop the half-cent sales tax at that time. Just tightening the budget to make it happen.
Okay. Thank you. Doug?
Thanks, Bert. Like I said before, the jail bond payment will now be reduced after we make the payment in February of over $2 million. It'll be reduced to a little over $600,000. That's a good thing. The clerk feels very confident we can make that. Now, I'm confident in the economy. In 2013, this 0.5% sales tax increase finally went over $3 million. It hadn't gone over $3 million in revenue since 2008 because we were struggling. The country was struggling. We finally have worked our way back up. We're coming back. People are spending more. They feel more confident. I hope it continues. As long as that continues, it's indicative of the sales tax as a whole to be good to the county. We will receive good revenue from that. I feel we can make these jail bond payments without too much struggle. Now, if the economy turns around, if it flatlines, if a number of things could happen, yeah, we're going to have to look at it as a budgetary matter. But we're not going to miss our payments, not make our payments. It'll be done. There may be some tough decisions. I don't know. I hope not. Because the bond originally was set up a specific way to take advantage of that local option sales tax and then for the county to be able to make the payments with a lot less struggle. So thanks for the question.
Thank you. The final question tonight is for our Senate and House candidates. And unfortunately, because of time, we're going to have to limit your answer to 1 minute after giving you 90 seconds the whole night. But the question is, what is your position on returning federal lands to state control, and how would you propose funding the care of these lands? John, we're going to start with you.
Well, I think that the way we're going about it by demanding that the feds turn over lands to the state is fallacious. It's against both the U.S. Constitution and against the Idaho Constitution. Now, I do think there's an opportunity for the landlord to contract with somebody a little closer, like us, to do management. But that's something that's negotiated and worked out, and it's not done as a fiat from the state. We do have to, however, realize how valuable those public lands are to hunters, to fishermen, people who camp, people who even come here just to view the beauty of Idaho. We have to keep public lands public.
Thank you. Mike?
The federal government's a mess. $17.5 trillion in debt. I think they need to clean up their own house before they tackle Idaho, and we need to get our land back. I think we can manage it, we can figure it out, but I just don't know how they're going to operate, and I think we're going to need as much resources as we can. So if we can get it back, let's get it back.
Dan?
Well, I've supported having the state involved in the management of these federal lands, and I think we have a good history of that and a lot of good examples we can look to. Back in the 90s, we talked about things like the state trust land models. It was real big in Arizona. Professor Fairfax down at Northern Arizona worked on a lot of that. In fact, she worked on some of that here in Idaho, where we looked at a model of about 200,000 acres where the state would manage those lands for multiple resources and probably improve the health of those lands. I think what's currently being done on our federal lands is not good. It's not healthy, and I think we all have to agree on that. I mean, the severity of the forest fires that we're seeing, the impacts to the health. I mean, drive through some of these communities and breathe that smoke for a week on end. That can't be healthy, and that contributes to our healthcare costs in this country. But anyway, yeah, I've been a supporter of that, some of the collaborative efforts, but we have to have a strong commitment to that to make those work.
And Pete?
Well, I agree with Dan and John about the ability of us to manage some of those forest lands, but not take ownership of them. It scares the crap out of me to see that happen, because if the state takes ownership of them, they can't afford to manage the fires and everything else. And so what do we end up doing? We end up selling that federal ground. And once we've got it sold, then all you're going to see is no trespassing. So I don't want to see Idaho for sale. I think we need to protect our public lands. We have a heck of a tourist and recreation outfitters, and what is the, John, let me ask you, what's the amount of money that comes in from that? It's billions, isn't it? That's one of our biggest industries, is that. So, no, it scares me to say we're going to sell public lands. No, we don't need that.
All right. I want to thank you, all of you, for being here tonight, especially thank our sponsors, the League of Women Voters, the City of Lewiston, Lewis Clark State College, and Jason Goldhammer for the great job he did. And of course, Maxine, thank you so much for all of your hard work. I want to thank the audience for being here. Thank our audience for tuning in. And finally, I want to thank our candidates, and you know, I truly like where we live, because, you know, as our 8 candidates show tonight, we can get along. We don't have to be name calling. We don't have to be every other else. So I want to thank them for, you know, willing to put their public service out there and help serve our area. So thank you very much for all that you do. This program, just a reminder, will be rebroadcasted several times on until November 2nd. And the green and pumpkin colored sample ballots for the general election are yours to keep. It has candidates and offices and important voter information on it. And remember, Election Day, this is what this was all about. Get out and vote. So voting is underway at the Nez Perce County Courthouse for early voting until Friday, October 31st at 5 p.m. and your precinct polling place on November 4th. So be sure to check for your specific requirements where to vote. And again, Election Day is November 4th. Again, thank you, candidates. Thank you, League of Women Voters, and good night.
Thanks, Bert.